If you could choose 3 events that occurred in the Bible at which you could have been present, well, which ones would make it on your short list? I think on mine, there would definitely be that 2-hour in-depth Bible study Jesus gave 2 of his disciples on the way from Jerusalem to Emmaus. There, it must have been fascinating to see Jesus explain from Scripture how it is talking about himself. In Luke chapter 24, we read that he says, "Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Well, he started with Moses, so I guess he must have referred to the Old Testament sacrificial system, because all these sacrifices in fact foreshadowed the one, the ultimate, the only sacrifice of Jesus Christ. With the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, God himself fulfilled his promise. He has given already Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden that there would come the one who would crush the serpent's head. It is Jesus' death on the cross which was planned from God right from the beginning. And here, he had it fulfilled. Now, I guess he also used something like Isaiah 53. It's a Bible text which talks about a suffering servant who comes from suffering to glory, as Jesus himself said here to his 2 disciples, from suffering to glory. Of course, from a New Testament viewpoint, Isaiah 53 is quite obvious. It's talking about Jesus. When the Ethiopian treasurer read 2 verses from the book of Isaiah, and it was Isaiah 53, and he asked the question of whom is the prophet talking about, Philip was happy to answer him, well, this is about Jesus Christ. He told him the good news. Even Jesus identified himself with the suffering servant in Luke 22. And in Hebrews 9:28, the author tells us that Jesus was sacrificed once for, and then he practically quotes from Isaiah 53 verse 12, for the sins of the many to take away. So Isaiah 53 is at the heart of the gospel message. There, in that chapter, it is said that Jesus suffered for us. It's a substitutionary suffering, a substitutionary death. He takes the sins for us. He takes our sickness. He does that willingly. This is quite a surprise. The servant could have opened his mouth, but he does not. The only explanation for that is that what he suffers is according to his own will. In fact, it says that God himself had pleasure in that what happened there. Not pleasure because he suffers, but it means that he has pleasure about the suffering servant because he's fulfilling God's plan. In fact, there's this one verse in verse 10 which is very interesting. There it says that the suffering servant makes his life an offering of sin. That's the one place in the Old Testament which makes very clear that Jesus giving of his life is to be considered an offering. Now, the offering of Christ is 101 of salvation language. Everyone who comes to Christ knows that he has died for us. So it's very obvious. The New Testament uses several different terms to describe what happened there. It says, for example, that Jesus' death is not only a sacrifice, he is the Passover lamb. He is the sacrifice of deliverance for us. He is our atonement, which explains that we have now a good relationship with God through Jesus Christ. He is our forgiveness. He paid an unpayable debt for us. He is our ransom, which means that he is the judicial means to set us free from imprisonment or from debt. He is our justification. That means that he is our acquittal in the court. He is our adoption, which means through his death, he integrates us into the family of God. He brings us cleansing. That means that we can enter into the sanctuary cleansed and be in the presence of the Holy God. Each one of these terms and this terminology used in the New Testament assures us of one of the aspects, of the facets of Jesus Christ's death. But it is much more. It is our first understanding that Jesus died for us, but it will last forever for us to study what Jesus Christ has done for us. Now here comes then a challenge to our lives, because it's so foundational, because it is the ground for our belief. Jesus' death on the cross could on a day-to-day basis be taken for granted. But we don't want to take it for granted. We want Jesus Christ's death to be in our mind all day. Day in and day out, we will accept what he has done for us. And that is what it is. Jesus' death is the ultimate proof of his love. It's the proof that God is just when he forgives us. It is the beginning of his priestly ministry, the entrance into his glory. And it is the reason why we will live forever.